Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Katie Montsinger, and I'm the Community Resource Director here at the Children's Attention Home. At the home, we provide a safe and nurturing home and life-changing services for children in foster care and homeless youth, not only here in York County, but across the state of South Carolina. And we are so glad to have Jimmy Autry joining us today as we are talking about the history of the Children's Attention Home. We are approaching our 50th year, and so we've got some fun projects in the works, and one of those is a book. And Jimmy was so gracious to agree to help us with this project. Jimmy has 37 years of experience in public relations. He retired from working in the electric co-op industry in the communications side of the business, and he's a certified cooperative communicator, is accredited in public relations, and was named to the Public Relations Society of America College of Fellows in 2006. And so we are so blessed to have Jimmy as a part of our team of volunteers and on our board here at the Children's Attention Home. And so he's also, in addition to serving on our board, serves as an ambassador for the home, and so is out helping us represent the home in various parts of our community. So thanks for joining us today, Jimmy. We're very grateful to have you.
I am so glad to be a part of it. Thank you for having me. I hope that this will be as exciting for the viewers as it is for me.
Yeah, yep. It's always fun to talk about just all the neat stories that that have made the home possible and gotten us to where we are today. So first, I want to start with just what inspired you to take on this project, and what has the process been like for you in uncovering the history of the home?
Well, I have to go back and tell everybody that it was, I retired in 2017, and we moved here from Georgia. And once I got settled here, I decided that I was going to find a way to meet new people in the community and find a place to serve. You may remember that I went to a meeting and I told folks that were all in nonprofits that I've just moved to town and I want to look to volunteer. I remember you came to me immediately and brought me a card and said there might be something I could do. So all I'm doing is trying to find a way to be connected, to continue to serve in a new community. I didn't know as many people, so I kind of had to do that. I have been blessed to be a part of Children's Attention Home, so it's been a fantastic start. So once we got to thinking about the 50th anniversary book, I think what happened in one of the meetings, I happened to say that I had written a history book before for another electric cooperative. As a matter of fact, I just done it last year. So the process is something I've been through, and I said, well, we'll try it and see if it works out for the home as well. So the basic process is there's a lot of places to get information, and two of the most important places is we have to read newspaper archives. We love the opportunity to go online now and to look at newspapers, not just the Rock Hill newspaper, but newspapers in surrounding counties, newspaper clippings for the Charlotte Observer. So we did the electronic search to find newspaper clippings. And then we have to certainly move back inside. The great thing about the home was we found picture photo books and scrapbooks and other kinds of history that were kept for purposes of history as well. And then, of course, we had access to much of the official documents of the organization as well. So much fun to get back in. There was we have electronic records back, as I remember, to like 2013. Prior to 2013, everything's on paper. So we got a chance to get into the history boxes as well as the history books to go through official minutes and those kinds of things that have been saved as well. So I had a great time doing I guess, where you look at everything that's committed to paper, either photographs or writing. And we go into that. But you know, all that stuff is, that's great stuff. But the really good information comes from real people, those who volunteered, those who served in different capacities. And so one of the techniques that we had used before, I had done for my other book as well, that we decided to do was if we could get people to come back and talk to us about their experiences, we'd get them, it'd be fun for them. They could share experiences, bring those memories. So that morning we did memories and muffins. We invited a lot of people to come back, spread out all the pictures and everything that we have on the tables, and what should I say, stoke the fire of memories. Ask people to tell me what you remember. Do you remember this picture? Who's in it? What event was it? Those kind of things. So we had just a great event where we had people. I was actually amazed that it was not just folks from the last 5 years. You may want to talk more about it, but we did Memories and Muffins. We had folks from 40 years ago who had memories and things to share, who brought written documents or brought pictures to share, that kind of thing as well. So we had a chance to talk to those folks. The other things that have occurred is a videotape with those who created history and the transcripts from videotapes that we've seen, people who talked about their history, talked about their experiences. And the great part is, because we've been using social media, we continue to get people to come in on Facebook and say, I was there in 1992, kinds of things. And so we're anxious to talk to more people and see what other memories. One person will generate another person to talk about what they recall. We've been putting all those things together. Who would ever have imagined? I think I'm up to 18,000 words. I've always been known as a very verbose person, and now I am on paper. So we've got lots and lots of stories to tell, pictures to share. I'm just excited how the process of the history book is coming along to be a part of the real 50th anniversary event that we're looking forward to. I think you're off. Yeah.
I am. There I am. Yeah, the Muffins and Memories event that we did back in January, I agree with you, Jimmy, was so it was different than I thought it was going to go, in a good way. You know, we really did have people from all different points in time of the home come up and talk about their experience and share their stories. And there was one gentleman that when I put two and two together about where he served and who he was, I think I overwhelmed him with my excitement to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like you, having come on board in 2015, you know, there's so much about the home that I didn't necessarily know coming in, or haven't been exposed to, because I've worked at the home for about 5 years now, but there's so much history and so many people that have gotten us where we are today, that it's such a fun thing to be a part of, uncovering just all of these stories of how people have stepped up and gotten us to where we are today. So I want you to take us back to the beginning and give us the highlight reel tour. So how did the home start, and what are some of the major milestones that the home has seen over the last 50 years?
Thank you for asking about that. It's so much fun to go back, especially for a person like me who never lived here, didn't know anything about it. It was all brand new to me, and I loved looking into it. So the story that was recounted in several newspaper articles, goes back to 1968, when a minister realized that someone who had been arrested had been taken to jail in Rock Hill, was here being held overnight. And because there were kids in the house and nobody to take care of the kids came with the person and actually stayed in the lobby of the Rock Hill jail, of the police station, and was doomed to stay overnight because there was nowhere else for them to go. A minister was called who got together with a couple of other ministers and ended up part of a Rock Hill Ministerial Association. Folks who were working together, different churches from all around, who got together, 3 ministers especially, got together and said, we need to find a solution for this. In their original survey, as they looked around, they said they found a home in Shelby, North Carolina, that was already operating, and they took a little trip and went up there and decided to look it over, and decided that the group home experience, like was going on in Shelby at the time, was something they wanted to replicate in Rock Hill. Well, things got underway in earnest early in 1970, when the organizational meeting was held, a board was formed, all those things to get the group together. Everybody's in agreement about what they want to do. And then they got about the business, the hard part, not just getting a charter from South Carolina in September of 1970, but the idea of actually have a physical home, a location. They found a place, they found a house. Really good part of the story there was the house was owned by the Wesley Foundation, the Methodist Church. And they were able to lease that house for a whopping, you got to picture this now, 1970, $75 a month for rent. And $75 a month was a big deal in that time. And you look into the history as they got started, and one church immediately said, the church itself, another one of the member churches, got together and said, we'll pay the rent. And so somebody had taken that on. And that's where the first house got started. The first house was relatively small, set up for maybe 7 children to begin with. And then they had to go about deciding who would take care of those children. And the concept was to hire a director who would become house parents. A director who would look after things would also live there. Husband and wife teams got started in the early times. And so they ended up hiring the very first of the directors who came on board. The house was rented, and Rick and Terry Gaskin came on board in September of 1970. And it was November of 1970. An open house was held, and people were able to come and see where the children would be living for the very first time. That's 1970. We could have 50th anniversary for several of the dates, but kids came to the home in November of 1970. So that's kind of we're going to celebrate a 50th year because we got a lot of things that are happening along the way in the 50th. But certainly that having children come and join us was very important. A couple of the highlights along the way, the home was always, it was how should I say, a used house, not gently used. The houses were fairly close to the campus of Winthrop. They were used for Winthrop kind of affairs and events and that kind of thing too, that the Methodist home had gotten set up, the Methodist church had set it up for. And so it was in some state of disrepair. It needed work. The house needed work along the way. And the volunteering, Bob Porterfield, who was an original incorporator to get things put together, Reverend Porterfield, decided that they would have to get volunteer efforts to kind of put this thing together. And they did it for this first house. But along the way, the first house became less able to handle the kids, not big enough, not able to deal with problems that came up. So they began to look for a second house and ended up finding a second house on the same street, but a second house. And in the history, it's kind of fun. I did find out that second house first in its life was a fraternity house. And it's funny because we don't have pictures and volunteer remembrances of cleaning up and painting and getting the second house ready, and the kinds of things they found left behind when they got ready to move into a fraternity house. The fun story there. All that's happening by 1985. As a matter of fact, the second house comes along. I'm trying to remember, let's see, we got opened, and the second house is in the mid-'80s. They found the house in 1985 and began to rent the house there, but it literally took them a while to get started. They bought the house, actually, not rented it, but bought the house, and it took a while to get it ready. As a matter of fact, it took nearly 2 years to get all the renovations done to get moved into that house. Once again, same street, down the street. They purchased the lot and the house, and the story goes nearly 300 volunteers worked on that house to get it ready, where actually churches and organizations in town were volunteering to say, I'll take this room or that room or the hallway, and literally do everything: retrofit, renovate, paint, outfit, furnish, doing all the work to get it ready. Another big part of our history was when that house got too small. As a matter of fact, one piece I wanted to share about that, as we had to leave, we got ready to look for another house along the way.
Mm-hmm.
That the second house only had 12 beds, and by 1995 we had served, over its 25-year history, more than 3,000 children had come through that home. But the part that told us that we were going to have to move out of that home was that between 20 and 25 children a month were being turned away because we didn't have enough space. There was just not enough room. And so we began to look into making changes. And that brought us to the 2000s, and actually in 2004, whenever we began to look for space for a campus. And they got land purchased, and what we now have is a campus today. The early buildings opened up in 2004. The administration building was added in 2008, and where we ended up with space for what I think originally was going to be 30, 35 students, but grew to 42 as they rearranged beds and so forth, that today's current capacity is 42. So the campus where we are today is open for 42 students to be there, as well as the all the things it takes for administration and so forth too. The other part that I learned about just this past week was the reason that we bought the Bridge House, the house that's on Ebenezer Road. The idea was that as abused and neglected children had moved to the home, they're kept separate, obviously, from parents, for whatever reason it might be. But the ultimate goal was that the children would be reunited with parents or other family members. And the idea of the Bridge House was twofold: to be a reunification house, a place where parents or grandparents or other family could come back and be reunified with a student who was leaving the home and going into the next facility or the next living arrangement in which they were going to be. Also, the Bridge House became our public facing. It's kind of we're on Ebenezer Road, and so it was a place where the community would know that we had people who worked, administrative folks who worked. So it was not only a place for meeting the kids, but also a place for administration and so forth in the Bridge House too. Yeah. So just great fun, a couple of highlights along the way of as we move from one facility to the next. The good part of this story, when you get a chance to read the book, is all the details and all the work and all the volunteers and all the contributions that made each one of our moves possible. Never could have been possible except for the community's contributions.
Absolutely. And, you shared a little bit, but we often talk about how the community is so integral to the operation of the home and has been, as you talked about, since the very beginning. So were there, I know you shared the fraternity houses. Are there any other volunteer stories that you came across through the years that you wanted to share that were maybe unique in nature or stood out?
Well, the volunteer stories have a lot in common. And one thing I noticed as I read back through this morning is one of the volunteers said, okay, I'm going to take a tour. I'm going to see what's going on. I've heard what happens there and that we need to take care of abused and neglected children. But for many volunteers, until they've had any exposure to it, they're like, I don't know what we're getting into. If we understand the nature of these children, they have great needs because the home that they came from was not meeting their needs for whatever reason. Abuse, neglect, they had to leave those homes. They're leaving, in some cases, they're leaving everything, coming with the clothes on their back. And so the volunteers in large part would tell me that I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't know what I was getting into. But let me tell you what's funny that goes through every volunteer story is after they volunteered, the amazement of the smiles they see in the children when they see happy children at the Children's Attention Home as compared to all the stories that they may have been told about. I mean, we don't hear all the details. We don't get names and faces connected. But in the background, we know that there's some really terrible stories of terrible childhood abuse. And what happens when a volunteer gets involved, they all tell me about the tremendous smile. As a matter of fact, the words I wrote just last week, the resiliency of children who've been through these terrible things and how much good the home does for them in getting them turned around for whatever time they might stay with us. So it has to do with the great smiles of the children and the resiliency of what they've changed from and what they've changed to.
Yes. And I mean, that's even through the years that rings true today. It's been interesting. We're doing a whole series and talking through some of our current volunteers, their stories, and those same themes continue to come up. So while so much has changed with the home over the years in just where we've been, or even in what it looks like to serve, the landscape of child welfare has changed since 1970. And, what the Bridge House was originally purchased for did not become what it was ended up being used as, but it still has remained very useful and was very much needed for us, even if we didn't quite see what that need was going to be at the time. But what hasn't changed is the kids and their need, and that our community still needs a place for them to go. And the fact that, from the very beginning, the seeds were sown that this was going to be a place where these kids received the love and attention they need in the time when they most need it, and that we would do everything we could to give them that. And so, it takes time, it takes volunteering, but it also takes a lot of funding to do this. So in addition to people's time, raising funds is a big part of what we have to do to make sure that we have the resources we need to operate. And so our budget today is about $2.5 million, but we certainly did not start that way. What are some of the unique ways that you saw through your research of how people raised money and raised funding for the home through the years?
Well, let me go back real quickly and tell the story of an early days, first couple of years, when the house parents, the director who was there would
Mhm.
say, well, we're down to $27 in the account. We don't have it. We got $27. We're not too worried about it. Somebody will step up, a church will come along, a contribution will come. But I actually found a note where one of the house parents wrote down, we're down to $27 at the time. So that gives you some example of $2.5 million in an annual budget. Things were a lot tighter at that point. In the early days, there was actually a federal government grant that paid the house parents. So that was that was taken care of, but everything for the kids had to be raised. All the money had to be raised. So the fundraisers that caught my eye, that those who read the book are going to be really excited about because it's just a lot of fun. Who would ever imagine that somebody would dive into Lake Wylie and swim 20 miles from the south end to the north end of Lake Wylie and raise money? It raised awareness because people were paying attention along the way. But just an amazing story of a swimmer who had been a long distance swimmer to begin with. I think you swim a little bit too. You were a swimmer as well. But somebody who'd done long distance swimming, when I read about the 20-mile swim, I'm thinking to myself, the Lake Wylie Bridge is only halfway. It's a long, I've driven around. It's a long distance. So swimming is kind of a big deal. But those who would swim, those who would walk and make plans to walk from here to the State House in Columbia to raise awareness, to talk to elected officials along the way. For those ladies who would get together and do a fashion show, they were actually sharing. It started out as a place that patterns would be used and shared from one to another. But these ladies every year would take their favorite patterns and make favorite dresses and show them off in a fashion show, and the money would come to the home as well. Then I looked back and saw where one of the middle schools, for at least 9 years, I don't know how much longer it lasted, but for 9 years, the middle school would have the 3 grades, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, compete against each other to see who could raise the most money, and in a year's time bring $3,000, $5,000, $7,000 to the coffers of the Children's Attention Home. Middle school students doing their own fundraisers along the way. And then there was a story of the gentleman who ran a used car dealership who decided he wanted to get out of the business. He was moving away and said in the news story that he was in construction, and he was going to run his construction company in another part of the state. So he decided to get rid of all the used cars on the lot. He just auctioned off every used car off the lot, I think 20 some cars, and the proceeds of the entire sale to the Children's Attention Home because he thought it was the right thing to do. So there have been some very unique, today, it's funny, we changed so much that I'm able to go look at needs on a list that's available on Amazon, and I can deliver things in, or you can bring money, you can make a donation online. And we still have groups who say, we have an idea for gathering food or bringing something you might need or raising money. So the creativity of the fundraisers are just amazing over the time period.
Yes, and we, like you said, we still see that today. Just the ways that people go out of their way to help us meet the needs of the kids. And while some of the grant funding and certain, some of those things have changed for the home, about 45% of our budget is still comprised of contributed support through either private foundation grants or private donations and corporate donations. And so it's donations from churches and groups in our community. And so that again, while so much seems to have changed, there are so many things that still remain the same in how we're in how we're able to operate and take care of these kids that are in our backyard, in our community. So with all of this research that you've done and your experience serving here at the home since 2017, if there's one thing you could share with those that may be watching this about the home, what would you share?
Well, I guess the thing that it started it for me, one, to be asked to volunteer, what could I do? I didn't know it was going to lead to joining the board, and I was sure happy that happened. But the most important thing is for everyone to come and take that tour without obligation. But if you come and spend a little time to see, so many of my friends in church told me that the tour made the difference, that they were able to see the work in action, see the facility, see what it takes. I don't want to take it for granted. People need to understand this is a residential group home, and that means 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I was frankly amazed when people talked to me about the number of full-time and part-time employees until you realize the kind of ratios you have to have adults to children. And you have to realize that it's 7 days a week all the time. As a matter of fact, so much more now that we're dealing with the environment of today with COVID-19, that school's not in and all these children are there at the home to be taken care of all the time. And all the needs that have to be met, all the needs. So I guess the real key that I would tell people is to spend the time, an hour if you can give it, to arrange to tour the facility, to see what we do. And I can almost guarantee if you ever tour and you get a feeling for it, it will impact you so much that you'll never let it leave your mind. There'll be time to give, volunteer efforts, and we have a whole book of opportunities for volunteering. Or if you just want to send a check, it just means a lot. That's what strikes me, whether or not I give time or money or donate paper towels or napkins, whatever it happens to be. It's hard for me to imagine a house of 42 with the adults around, just how much toilet paper could be used in a certain amount of time. So for those of you who've been thinking about that, you can find a way that you can serve and give. One tour, give us an hour and come see it, and you'll be amazed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's you mentioned earlier with the smiles of the kids, and often on tours, which I do a lot of in my role at the home, that's one of the things that people will say often is it's happy here, because like you said, they have a lot of people come in with a understanding from what you see in the media. You have the Annie orphanage, or Despicable Me is even set in an orphanage, or Oliver Twist, where it's this dark, dreary place, and that's certainly not where these kids need to be, nor the environment they need to be in. So it's really the opposite. And I think, like you said, coming and seeing and experiencing the home, it will certainly leave an impression. And while we can't do tours in person right now, we are still doing virtual speakers. So if anything you heard today, or you have a specific topic in mind that you'd like to invite me to come and speak to a group, it'd be one way to get your group together through this time of physical distancing. We could get together and talk more about the home. And we just actually posted today in honor of Volunteer Appreciation Week our walk through the village, if you will, and highlighted a lot of our volunteers that help us day in and day out, and took a walk through the home. And so I encourage you to go on Facebook and check out that video. But when we're up and running again, we certainly, if you hadn't had a chance before, please join us for a tour and come see the results of everything that Jimmy's talked about today. Where we've gotten to as a result of the work of so many people and the investment of so many. If you want to find out more about the Children's Attention Home, you can go to our website, attentionhome.org. As we mentioned, we also have the 50th coming up. We're going to kick it off in the fall. We've got some fun projects, and one of those is capturing the history of the home. And there's so many pieces that we know that we don't have yet, because they rest with you. They rest with people. They're your memories. And so if you have a memory that you want to share with us, we encourage you to leave them in the comments below, or email them to memories@attentionhome.org. We would love to see your pictures, experience your memories, or email us, and we can set up a call like this to share what your stories and your experience has been with the home. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Jimmy, thank you so much for giving your time and joining us today. And we hope you guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye now.
Bye-bye.